At our press conference this morning, we talked about the importance of international trade, and we have a lot of jobs. In fact, Iowa just set an all-time record, $15.1 billion in exports last year. All-time record, and there's a lot of jobs in our state that are dependent on that. This weekend, of course, we've got the Ag Summit coming up. A good friend of ours, Branstad is hosting that. It's going to be a great opportunity to talk to the presidential candidates about issues involving agriculture. And we all know it's a lot more than the Farm Bill and crop insurance. It includes international trade. It includes renewable fuel standard. It includes regulations and taxes as well that are important. And we all know that what the EPA has done with the renewable fuel standard has driven price of corn below the cost of production. And that's of great concern to all of us because Iowa is an agricultural state, and we had some very good years from about 2007 to 2013. But last year, and the USDA is estimating that farm income will be down 33% in 2015. So that's obviously a great concern to all of us. We have submitted our budget to the legislature on the second day of the session, and I just last week signed the motor fuel user fee, which increases, as you know, the tax on gas and diesel fuel, but it also increases the fees for heavier loads transported across our state. Our fees were the lowest in the region. And it also requires the Department of Transportation to find an additional $10 million in administrative savings each of the next 2 years on top of the $50 million that they've already done in the last few years. I believe that was a necessary piece of legislation in order to meet the infrastructure needs of the state, not just for the state highways and bridges, but also for the counties and for the cities. About 50% of that goes to the Iowa DOT, about 30% to the counties, 20% to the states, to the cities. So 30% to the counties, 20% to the cities, and 50% to the state. It's going to make it possible for us to move up a number of state projects and hopefully help the counties so they don't have to go out and borrow money. Some counties have been selling bonds and borrowing money, and that means that the property taxpayers have to pay back that. So I know that was one of the questions, is the fuel tax, and will some of that go to the local level? And indeed, half of it will go to the cities and counties, and hopefully that will mean you won't have to use property tax to pay for critical road and bridge work here in Keokuk County or in other counties. Education funding. When I came back as governor, the state was facing a projected deficit of $900 million. The previous governor and legislature had used one-time money for ongoing expenses, and they had shorted the school aid formula. Well, first of all, Culver cut 10% across the board in 2009, which directly cut money to education, which gets the biggest chunk of the state budget. So when you do across the board cut, obviously 10% of the cut hit education, plus some of that was pushed on to property taxes. I'm proud to say we've straightened all that out. We've restored the money taken from the cash reserve and economic emergency account. Those accounts are now full, and that's about 10% of the state budget. And we've submitted a 2-year budget with 5-year projections, and we are in the process of providing ongoing property tax relief, $127 million of state dollars replacing property tax last year. So commercial and industrial property saw a reduction of at least 5%, and the smaller Main Street businesses actually saw a much bigger reduction than 5%. Sometimes as much as 30, 40, 50%. And next year there'll be a similar reduction in that property tax. We also are providing money for Yeah, he has the one. We are providing money for the teacher leadership program, which is providing additional $50 million each year for the next several years, and for a 3-year period. And we're also providing additional funding for early childhood reading, and also a stipend for people in the top 25% of their class to go into teaching math and science and stay and teach in Iowa for at least 5 years. There's a $20,000 stipend on top of their salary. They get paid over a 5-year period. In terms of quality workers in this area, we have started a number of programs to try to help us attract quality workers. We have the Skilled Iowa program. We last year passed Home Base Iowa, which is designed to try to attract people coming out of the military. It's a lot of quality, hardworking, reliable people in the military, but we're seeing a big reduction in that. We eliminated the tax on military retirement. We're giving them that $5,000 home buyer's credit for military veterans. We placed nearly 1,000 already in just 7 months in jobs in Iowa through that Home Base Iowa program. We also have some other programs like we tripled the funding for apprenticeships, and this is particularly important in the construction industry. And for instance, right now there are 2,900 construction jobs at that fertilizer plant that's being built down in Lee County. And that's going to reduce the cost of nitrogen fertilizer by $740 million. That plant will be done at the end of this year. And I'm hopeful we'll see an expansion. They're going to have at least 240 permanent jobs there, but right now they got 2,900 construction jobs. Mental health funding and mental health redesign. We're in about the 3rd year of that redesign program. The state has put additional money into it, plus through our Iowa Health and Wellness Plan. Through the Iowa Health and Wellness Plan, we've been able to attract some additional federal dollars to replace the property taxes for mental health. And we're, as a result, I think going to be able to provide better and more uniform mental health services throughout the state of Iowa. It's about a 5-year phase in, and we're about
third
the
year
third year
in,
into it.
I think, yeah.
Question about the state patrol officers declining because of retirement. We actually have a school going on right now for new members of the Highway Patrol, and we are actually adding to the numbers in the patrol. I know one of them is the daughter of our former chef at Terrace Hill. It's kind of an interesting story here. Dawn Greenfield graduated from DMAC in the Culinary Arts program. My wife hired her. The previous chef had married a trooper and left. So she said, well, I hope you don't have any interest in that. Well, she was married off to a state trooper within a year. So I called it Chris's maid finding service. Well, Dawn Smith is her name, and then she became the mayor of Durant, and now recently was elected to the Cedar County Board of Supervisors. Her and her husband, who is also her husband is a state trooper, have a son that's one of the members of that class of new troopers. And I think
They passed additional funding last year to bring on more.
the legislature
We could give
authorized
them
additional money,
Yeah.
so we are actually
Right.
adding to, so not only will we be replacing the ones retiring, we'll actually be adding, and the goal is to have at least one trooper living in each county in the state of Iowa. So we are increasing the number of troopers. The last question, I think, dealt with who receives the gaming revenue from the casinos. And that goes into an infrastructure fund, and that money goes to pay for infrastructure projects around the state, whether it's the Capitol Complex, the state universities, or things like that. This is vertical infrastructure as opposed to horizontal infrastructure. So the road money goes into your roads and bridges. This money goes into other projects. Now the problem we had with that, Yeah, Vision Iowa is
Also
one of the
sees
projects,
them, yeah.
and Vision Iowa provides grants to local community projects, but that comes out of this infrastructure money. One of the problems is, you may recall back during the Culver administration, they passed this big bonding scheme called Iowa Jobs. And so off the top, $55 million a year for 25 years goes to pay interest on those bonds. So we have 55 million of the money that would otherwise go to this vertical infrastructure for 25 years, and we're only about 5 years into it. So we've got 20 more years to pay that debt. That's the reason why I'm so strongly against debt financing. I believe in doing things on a pay-as-you-go basis. The road money we're doing is on a pay-as-you-go basis, and in fact, we're saying we don't want any county to bond for any project that's not going to be paid for, that's going to wear out before the bonds are paid for. Because some counties have done that, and that doesn't make any sense. So I tried to kind of go through and answer the questions as part of the presentation. The Lieutenant Governor is really my partner, and she has kind of focused on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I'll turn it over to her.
Okay, so I'm trying to listen really carefully to see what he hasn't covered, but thanks, Bob, to Sinclair for hosting us. We appreciate that very much. This is my second visit here because on one of the 99 county tours, I was able to stop and visit and actually got to drive one of the great big tractors that after I drove down the path, it drove itself back. So it was very exciting to have an opportunity to get to do that. Now I want to do it in a field. So those are not the tractors that I grew up with when my dad was farming way back when I was little. So I hope to actually get in the field with one of them. But as the governor indicated, STEM is something I'm passionate about. And the STEM Advisory Council was implemented in July of 2011, I think, by executive order from Governor Branstad. And it's really, we've taken a multifaceted approach to make sure that we have that talent pipeline for business and industry as we move into the future. And most importantly, make sure that our kids have the skills that they need to be successful in a global knowledge-based economy. And we've got great jobs that require those skills right here in the state of Iowa. So that's the jobs of the future. They're here in Iowa. And I tell these kids, whether they're going to get a certification program, a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, or a PhD, if they know math and science and technology, then they get to choose what field that they want to go into if they have that foundation. And it's been just a tremendous collaboration. It's a public-private partnership between education and business and industry, and it's really brought the two together. They were kind of operating in silos, and we really need each other. We need business kind of helping educators identify what they need that workforce to look like. And so they've also provided internships for our kids to get in these manufacturing facilities or these businesses and see what it looks like to apply what they're learning. And also educators have an opportunity through externships to go into some of these facilities, and they will completely flip the way that they're teaching when they go back into their community. Economic development, especially in rural Iowa, has been a passion of mine since being a county treasurer for 19 years in Clark County and then as a state senator. Because I've always said if Iowa is going to continue to grow, we have to grow in every single corner of this state. It can't just happen in pockets. And I'm really proud of the development that we've seen over the last 4 years. Almost $10 billion of capital investment in the state, and that has happened in all over the state of Iowa. And the best part of it is, although we hear kind of about the new industry coming in, which is great, but almost 80% of that has gone to existing businesses like this that have already located in Iowa but have made the commitment to grow and expand. And so I think that's a great tribute to economic development, Debbie Durham, and what they're doing for existing business and industry as well as bringing new business and industry into the state. I think this keeps growing. So I think we're about at 172,900 new jobs created. Our goal was 200. So we're making progress towards that.
It's a 5-year goal.
A 5-year goal. We're in our 5th year. State unemployment's down a little over 30% since taking office, and we're continuing to work on that. And so we've got a great foundation to build on. We're working, infrastructure is really important. The governor talked a little bit about dealing with roads and bridges and really that infrastructure in the state, and he's already signed that. But the other piece is broadband, so that we can connect every acre so that our rural communities can be successful by creating jobs,
and so these tractors can communicate with each other.
Precision farming, and so if we're going to have these wonderful tractors with all of this technology, they need to be able to have the broadband capability of utilizing it. Center for Human Capital Enrichment, again, just it's a public-private partnership in workforce development, bringing business and industry workforce programs and education together, streamlining it, and then scaling what's working. Iowa Next is kind of the same type of program too. It's DNR, Department of Cultural Affairs, DOT, and Economic Development. Again, streamlining, eliminating the silos, and really scaling programs that are working, getting more dollars out into the state. This will be the third year in a row. Our students that are attending our 3 state universities will not see any increase in their tuition, and we want to continue to do everything we can to keep higher education costs down, working with the community colleges, private colleges, as well as the universities. And we have in place a student debt organization tax credit that if these kids decide to volunteer at specifically identified non-for-profits, then they can get payment back on their student loan. So it encourages them to, what's the word I'm looking for? Volunteer, that's the word I'm looking for. It encourages them to volunteer, and by doing that, then they can help reduce some of their outstanding debt. So that's just some of the things that we're working on in this legislative session, and I'll stop and go to questions.
Yeah, we open it now for your questions. And they want to go just around the room, or want to raise hands?
And maybe if we didn't do enough detail, or if you have...
Yeah, if you have any follow-ups on any of
follow-up
these,
questions,
I tried to hit on those 6 questions that were on the sheet here, but maybe there's some follow-up you want to ask on those. Yes, sir.
So the hospital here in Sigourney
Yep.
Health Center. And one of these is just more of a recent topic, so I already forgot on that, is relating to the Medicaid managed care.
Yeah.
Is that going to be different, hopefully, than like the Iowa Care Program where you only have?
Yeah, it's totally different. It's in 30-some states have done this, and it's a different approach towards it, and it's focused more on trying to improve the medical outcomes rather than just reimbursing based on procedures. We've done this in the mental health area with Magellan. You might be familiar with them.
Yeah, they like to deny a lot of payment, so that's where it's a big concern for us.
Well, again, it's not an easy thing, and we're trying to manage the cost of it. I will tell you that each year for the last 4 years, the federal share has gone down on Medicaid and our share goes up. This year, it's an additional $47 million that were paid by the federal government last year, we have to pay this year. Medicaid is the Pac-Man in the state budget. We've got to do something about it. And so we're going out to bids. We've already gone out to bids. We're waiting now to get the response to that. We'll probably have 2 or 3 companies that will do managed care. But I think managed care is going to be the way of the future. And we want to do it in a way that is actually going to improve the outcomes, rather than just spend more money.
Will it eliminate, I guess, kind of like the Iowa Hospital Association, they've kind of been talking about the accountable care organizations and the STEM
Yep.
project for the state was kind of goes, will those go away then?
No, that's still going to be there. That is part of the Iowa Health and Wellness Plan.
Right.
And that is also designed to try to focus more on improved outcomes.
Right.
And that replaced the Iowa Cares program where you had to go to the University of Iowa or to Broadlands.
Right.
And I think it's a big improvement over that. We've heard good things about that. And now managed care is just another step along the way. But managed care deals only with Medicaid, whereas that's the Iowa Health and Wellness Plan deals with people that are not on Medicaid, many of whom in the past probably were the ones that weren't able to pay their bills, frankly.
It's more holistic care, I think, too, more integrated. But I think one of the benefits of us going now is, as the governor indicated, several other states have gone, and we've been able to kind of, work with them and gather best practices, and hopefully that puts us in a much better place moving forward. But that is where you're going to see, it's a better quality of care, hopefully, and to base it on outcomes versus inputs.
Yeah, and generally speaking, we've been getting good response from the RFP that's going out on the managed care. and we'll have to see where that goes, but it's our intention to go ahead and implement that, I think, beginning January 1. And they estimate the savings to be, in just the first 6 months, $51 million.
You mentioned supplemental aid for our
Schools,
schools,
yeah.
support for schools. Where do you think the aid's going to end up this year? And my second part of my question is the TLC, the teacher leadership. There's some in the legislature currently that want to link that into the formula for supplemental aid, the 50 million. And how can you?
Well,
It
first of all,
rolls into the formula.
it does roll into the formula after we get to the third year.
Yeah.
1/3 of the students got the benefit of that 50, from the teacher leadership last year, or this school year.
Yeah, yeah.
Another third of the students will get the benefit next year, and then the final third the year after that. Then it all rolls into the formula.
Correct.
Okay, we don't want to change that. We think that makes sense, and and that's a commitment we made in 2013. And that's a commitment I'm going to protect with a veto pen if necessary. I don't think that's going to be necessary, but because I think it's really been a good program and it's working. But we want to learn from the school districts that are doing it this year and as we expand it in the coming years. In addition to that, we have recommended supplemental state aid of about another 50 million this year, and then and so that totals 100 million between the supplemental state aid and the teacher leadership. We're also putting money into I think $10 million into helping kids that are struggling in at-risk
Yeah,
children.
at-risk,
Yeah.
Plus
We,
it's significant.
plus we have additional money we put into the early childhood reading program. And we have money for this stipend for high achievers that go into teaching. That will provide $20,000 paid over a 5-year period. If they're in the top 25% and go into teaching, math, science, or special ed.
Well, overall, it's about
Oh.
$3 billion of a $7 billion budget.
Yeah, presently it's $3 billion of a $7 billion budget. My recommendation for the next 2 years, you count supplemental state aid, plus the teacher leadership program, plus the early reading, plus the stipend for high achievers going to teaching is another $250 million. So in light of the fact that revenue is falling below expectations, I do not think the legislature is going to be able to do more than we recommended. I encourage them to do it early. I think they'll probably fight for a long time over it. But my prediction is, at the end of the day, since revenue is below expectations by $100 million, and farm income is estimated to be down 33%, I don't see where they're going to be able to cut.
Yeah, they'd have to cut someplace
They're gonna have to
else.
cut really deeply somewhere else. And frankly, they wanna spend more in mental health, and they wanna spend more in other areas, not less. So I think, honestly, I believe that what we put together, and we put a lot of thought into it, is what we thought we could afford with the financial circumstances we're faced with the next 2 years.
Were you one of the first school districts to?
No, we're applying
This-
for
the-
this year.
Okay, I was thinking.
We'll
if
be
you
in
were-
year 3.
Okay,
You're in three,
okay.
okay. But generally, I'm hearing good things about that. Obviously, we're gonna monitor it, see, and hopefully, being in the third year, you can look at and
Yeah.
learn from the other districts and
Yeah.
what programs have really worked there.
And we're actually gonna visit several of the schools in the next couple of months to visit with the teachers and the educators and the administrators and just kind of hear firsthand what they think of it. But we've had really positive feedback,
And
especially from the educators.
2 school districts got a federal grant to do this early.
Oh, yeah.
Central Decatur and
Sadell.
Sadell, and the lieutenant governor and I visited, met with the administrators and teachers in those districts, and they were very positive about their experience. And so we're very hopeful this will be helpful and be something that will really improve student achievement.
what's your thoughts of extending the 1 cent sales tax past 2029?
Well, it's way too far out.
Well,
2029,
But for school districts,
yeah, we don't want a bunch of bonding. We don't want a bunch of bonding, so I would probably be opposed to that. I would rather see things decided on a pay-as-you-go basis. The other thing, and let me say, I think it's great to do this with sales tax rather than property tax for the school infrastructure. But I tell you what, if you let people bond out for 20, 30, 40 years in the future, you've got an obligation, and you don't have, that's what the state of Illinois has done with their road money. So almost all their road money is now going to pay debt, and they can't build or repair roads. I don't want to do that. My home county, the county did bonding for roads. I think, well, I guess I gotta say that, I just think we ought to do things on a pay-as-you-go basis, so 2029 to me is a long time off, and I don't think we ought to extend it so that people can float long-term bonds. We just paid off the bonds for Honey Creek, and that was not a good deal. That should not have been done with borrowed money. I mean, I love that resort, but I just don't think it should have been done with borrowed money. Well, another one is the state prison, which still isn't open yet. That was done with borrowed money. The problem is when you do things with borrowed money, oftentimes you don't think about what the real costs are going to be. And we're paying those costs, as I said, $20, $55 million a year that could go to infrastructure is going to pay debt. And this is one governor that doesn't believe in more debt. Now, people that run our federal government thinks it's great. We got $18 trillion worth of debt, and every 1% interest rates go up, the cost of financing this national debt is, I really believe it is one of the huge challenges facing the future of this country. And when we're in good economic times, we ought to be paying down debt, not incurring more debt. So now you know my philosophy about debt. Are there other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about the leadership role that Iowa is doing with the nutrient reduction strategy and
Yes.
with some of the upcoming lawsuits and things like that?
Well, the Secretary of Agriculture, the DNR, Iowa State University, and the governor's office have all been working together on this. And we were one of the first states to come up with a voluntary nutrient reduction strategy, working with the landowners to try to reduce the runoff that we have from nitrogen and phosphorus, which are causing a problem in the Gulf of Mexico. And this has received, actually,
Well, Gina McCarthy said it would be a role model for other
right,
states.
so
I mean,
this is the
they're
director of
looking
the
at
federal
Iowa.
EPA,
Yeah,
which can be really tough, but they've been
Yeah.
very positive about what we're doing.
yep,
So has the USDA,
yep.
and so we are in the process of increasing funding each year for this, and this includes more filter strips, grass waterways, cover crops, and a number of other strategies to try to reduce the runoff. Now,
Based on science.
yeah, so it's scientifically based in working with the landowners. And actually, at the state fair, we're gonna be honoring several landowners that have been real leaders in conservation practices. We've done that the last 2 years, we're gonna do it again this year at the state fair. We're taking applications for people to be recognized, so if you have anybody you think should be honored and recognized for their progress that they've made or the practice they've put in place, nominate them. Unfortunately, the Des Moines Water Works has decided to sue 3 counties in northwest Iowa. Now, why they chose these 3 counties, and now I grew up in northern Iowa. You don't have as much of these drainage districts down here in southern Iowa as we have up there, but in north central and north, they used to say you could paddle a canoe all the way from Mason City to Fort Dodge before they started putting in drainage districts in tile in north Iowa. So a lot of the best farmland in Iowa was nothing but swamp, and you couldn't farm it. So about 1900, they passed a constitutional amendment and established drainage districts. And those drainage districts are funded by the landowners who are benefited from the drainage, because their land was swamp before that. And the result has been, in Winnebago County, where I was from, and I did practice law there, they didn't teach you anything about drainage law in law school. Then I get into law practice and I find I gotta learn about drainage law. So there's a guy from, yeah, there's a lawyer from Pocahontas that wrote a book on drainage law, so I tried to learn as much as I could about drainage law, but, and even to this day, so you have these drainage districts, and then you have tile lines that go into those drainage districts. Now, this is all surface water runoff from rain, okay? The Des Moines Water Works is calling it groundwater. Now, we know that groundwater is what you get if you dig a deep well. That's groundwater. This is surface water. And it's just a little bit below the surface because you put a tile in there to get this excess water so you can farm the land instead of having it be wet year round. And, you know, I guess it was probably good habitat for ducks, but not for much else. So that's the issue that's up, and I don't think it's fair what they're doing, that they just decide to pick on 3 counties. And the reason why the counties are involved is because the drainage districts they're a separate entity, but they are all, the county supervisors, I think, have some say over them. I think they even elect their own. Some of the supervisors could probably tell it. Do you have any down there?
We never had it in Clark County, so.
See, you don't have, it is a big headache up there in northern Iowa, I can tell you, from just practicing law. And you know, and if you had a situation where you have, because I dealt with this as a lawyer, dealing with farmers, you know, because if we're to work, everybody in the drainage district has to work together.
Yeah.
Because if the person downstream doesn't cooperate, then the guy upstream, his land is not tillable. It's swamp again. So it's worked for 100 years, and it has made a real difference, and it's made land that was totally unproductive productive and tillable. I'd hate to see us go back to, and frankly, I don't think we can afford to. We've got to feed a world growing population. And if we take a whole bunch of some of our best productive land out of production, I think that would be economically would be disastrous for the state of Iowa, as well as hurting the farmers.
Well, and the hypocrisy of it is once they take the nitrates out, then they dump it back in the river, and then Ottumwa gets to deal with it on down the stream. So
Well,
we're not
Ottumwa's-
really addressing the problem, you know, I mean, come on. I mean, let's all work together, figure out what we need to do to protect the environment. Farmers want to be a part of that. This is how they make their living. They want to leave that for their children and grandchildren, and so let's sit down at the table and figure it out instead of going to a lawyer.
Well, the other thing that I think is, over time, I think this nutrient reduction strategy is going to help us do this, and we can see what works and what doesn't work, and continue to perfect and improve it. And as you know, farmers are going more and more to precision farming, putting on less chemicals and fertilizer just where they need it, and all of that's going to also help reduce.
Technology.
And minimum till and all of that are part of helping solve that problem.
Are those some of your panels out there that we saw when we drove by?
Not these ones, the
Okay.
other ones in town.
Okay, other questions?
This is kind of a trade-related issue.
Yeah.
I'm a farmer, live just a few miles from here. We raise corn, soybeans, and hogs. Recently, the hog price has dropped dramatically, especially in the nearby. And from what I understand, there's a number of factors involved, but a large part of it is due to the dock workers' strike on the West Coast.
It's been settled.
Yeah,
It's been
and
settled, and hopefully
I'm aware
that'll
of
help.
that, but I just was wondering, is there any pressure that we can bring to bear at the state level to help do something to avoid allowing a relatively small number of dock workers to hold up exports?
Where we just came from, Dexter, remember we told you about this company that's making the washing machines and the dryers? Commercial, they're shipping out, that's out of the East Coast now, going all the way around the Cape because of this dock strike. So it's caused a lot of disruptions, and it has hurt, it's hurt soybean and pork exports as well. The strike has now been settled, so hopefully that should be over, but we don't, at the state level, don't have much control over that. That's really, the federal government can do something, but it's really a dispute between the dock workers and the companies that.
I like to say, as important as it is, it seems wrong that
It is.
a very small group of people who, from what I understand, are very, very well paid as it is, can go on strike. And, well, I'm just, I have about 1,000 market-ready hogs, so I could say their strike probably cost me personally $20,000 to $30,000.
Yeah.
That won't certainly.
That you won't get back, no. No, I understand. The only good news is that it is settled, so
Yeah.
hopefully it's gonna improve. Also, we think that, because of the market in China, their growing economy, and they want to have, and they are major pork consumers, as they get more into the middle class and they want more protein. We think in Smithfield, now owned by a Chinese company, that there's gonna be a growing demand from China, and hopefully that's gonna help bring back this price for pork. We're also concerned about, obviously, what the lack of a robust renewable fuel standard has done to the price of corn as well. Thanks, Lady.
I have a question on road and bridge funding. It's been 26 years since the last time you raised the gas tax. This year, you raised it 10 cents. Your 2011 Citizens Advisory Commission put together a lot of other recommendations to make road and bridge funding sustainable.
Yep.
Do you see supporting any other measures, either through this session or future sessions, that would maybe index pricing to keep up with it instead of just letting?
We seriously looked at that. We looked at maybe, instead of the conventional cent per gallon, that we would maybe do a sales tax type thing on fuel. But then you know what happened to the price of fuel. It dropped really dramatically, and a lot of legislators were fearful that it's gonna bring in near as much money. And consequently, that concept, which we looked at all these different concepts and ideas, but the leadership decided that the simpler cents per gallon is the way. But the problem is, we know as we go to more and more fuel efficient vehicles, and that will not keep up with inflation. The other two sources of revenue in the road fund are your sales tax or use tax when you buy cars and trucks. And that goes up as the price of cars and trucks go up. And the other one is the registration fees on cars and trucks, and that's based on value and weight. So that goes up as the value goes up. But the gas and diesel fuel doesn't, and that's been the problem over this period of time, and it's gonna continue to be a problem. And it's not only a problem for us, but it's a problem for other states as well. So at the governor's meeting, we talked about this, and then there's an issue about the federal level. Because the federal highway trust fund runs out in May. And one suggestion was made, the federal government takes about 30% off the top to fund a bunch of other things, mass transit, bicycle trails, things like that. We don't do that in Iowa. We now have that road use money is protected by constitutional provision, and it does go for the state, county, and cities, roads and bridges. But somebody suggested that maybe you just repeal the federal tax and let the states replace it, and then you wouldn't have that big cut being taken off the top. I think Senator Grassley and some others have suggested that maybe looking at some alternatives. I don't know what's gonna happen with what the Congress is gonna do, but it really does need to be addressed.
Plus, we've just seen a decline in the federal dollars coming into the state also. I think it's been 3.4% over the last 2 years. So and it's not predictable because they can't do any long-term, you know, funding. I mean, we're always piecemealing it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
There's no
Another
predictability there.
Another idea that Paul Tribino has is, with the federal money has got strings tied to it, such as Davis-Bacon, and it drives up the costs. If the state took that and then gave state money to the counties, then they wouldn't have to live with those strings, and you could, at the county level, be able to build more roads and bridges, I think that's a great idea, and the House Republicans do, but the Senate Democrats, they can't get it through the Senate, because the unions don't like it. So that's one of the challenges we've got, is trying to get something that we can get approved through both houses of the legislature. We were able to get that done in the motor fuel, but let me tell you, we had 5 meetings with
And
the
all
leadership.
options were on
And
the
we
table.
looked at all the
We
options.
put everything on the table.
And this is what we could get a consensus on, and 50% or more of each caucus, House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, voted for it. That's the only way we could get it done. It was not easy, but I think it's gonna make a difference, and there's still people that are not happy about that either.
Right.
But the fact is, I think it's the art of the possible, and I think it will make a difference. And there's a lot of other things we could do. Paul Tribino's a great problem solver, and he has agreed to find an additional $10 million of administrative savings each of the next 2 years. He's already done $50 million in the last 4 years. Other questions?
Just a quick comment. I'd like to say thank you for your support of the solar initiatives going on. I sit on
Yep.
the Iowa Solar Energy Trade Association with Tim White, and the tax breaks that happened last year were fabulous. We're doing some massive school projects, as an example, different parts of the state. It's actually allowed us to extend up into Minnesota and Nebraska with additional work, because we did over, I think, 70 projects last year. And I know there's a lot of other businesses like our own that have shown significant growth because of that.
Well, we're excited about that. I was down in Burlington and saw that school where they're putting solar panels on the roof there. And I found out, I thought the best place for solar panels would be Mojave Desert. And I found out that's not necessarily true. It's what's it called? Ultraviolet rays more than.
We do well
than
here.
the heat of the sun.
We do well.
Iowa.
We have the great, yes.
So I learned something about that. And we've been a real leader in wind energy, and I think the tax credit's gonna help us expedite the growth of the solar industry as well.
Well, and I didn't look around the table, but on one of my other 99 county visits, I actually had the opportunity to visit your company as well, so I didn't see you sitting over there until I started looking around, so.
Okay? Yes, sir? Go ahead.
The Iowa court system isn't going to force us to enhance our security at the courthouses, are they? But to me, the little girl who working down at Casey's or the people working in here are as important as we are.
Yeah.
We can't afford security everywhere.
Well, I agree. I think we gotta use common sense in terms of what we do there. And we all wanna be safe and secure. And I know I was here when he had the tragedy of was it a deputy sheriff that was killed here? And I went to his funeral, and those tragedies sometimes happen, but we've gotta try to work together to deal with it. But I don't think the court's gonna impose that. I think they're gonna meet with the counties and talk about different options to deal with it.
I think the chief indicated that when we had one of those lunch
Yeah.
meetings or breakfast meetings, that he
So I think
realized
he
one
wants-
size doesn't fit all.
Right.
That we would.
The state has taken over the cost of funding the court system, but the counties still have the courthouse part of it. We pay for the judges and the clerks and all of that. And we did that in my first term as governor. We lifted that off the property taxpayers. It used to be, if you had a murder that occurred, this literally happened. Gitche wanted to State Park, which is in the northwest corner of Iowa, it's in Lyon County, and the victims and the perpetrators were all from South Dakota, but the murder occurred in Iowa. So the property taxpayers in Lyon County had to pay the entire cost of that. And that's why, when I got to be governor, we phased out, the state took over the cost of funding the court system. With the exception of the courthouse, which is of course owned by the county and is used for a lot of other things besides court. But that's still paid for by the county, and we understand that that'd be a burden on the property taxpayers if the court imposed that. I don't think it'd be right. If they did it, it seems to me it ought to be out of their budget. But their budget is out of state dollars, and that's tight too. Now, they have my hands really tied, because the legislature, when we passed in 1986, when we passed the bill to reorganize state government, this was the bill to reorganize state government, and they basically said that whatever the court asked for in their budget, I just have to pass it through the legislature. So the legislature can cut their budget, but I can't make any different recommendations than the court asked for. So I'm out of the loop, other than signing or vetoing the whole, but I can't veto the court's budget.
You can talk to them.
Well, I can talk to them, and we do.
We did. Yeah,
Every quarter,
Yeah.
the lieutenant governor and I meet with the chief justice. And I appointed him 3 times. I appointed him as the district court judge of the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. Now, and he's a decent guy. Mark Cady is the chief justice. He's from Fort Dodge. And we meet every quarter, and we do talk about some of these issues. We're separate branches of government, and we have to respect each other. But we do have a decent relationship with them. And my feelings is he's not going to force the counties on this. He is going to try to see what can be worked out, but I think my sense is he's going to try to do it in a cooperative way. Other questions?
Do you have time for one more really hard one?
Sure.
Which Iowa team is going to go further in the tournament? I think they're all 3 going to make it.
I think they're all 3 going to make it. Yes, Egypt, or some of them.
Okay, the Iowa women. How about that? I saw Lisa Bluter's team win yesterday against Minnesota, and they played a heck of a game. It was the final game for the seniors, and they won all 16 of their home games this year. But, all 3 teams are good.
Yeah.
I think if you look at just the standings, you got to say UNI.
Yeah.
UNI has not played Iowa State.
Yeah.
And I think on any given night, Iowa State could beat anybody. But
Or they get hold of everybody.
it all depends, I saw one game they played, and they played the best defensive basketball game I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. But then, this last game, they kind of blew it. So, I don't know. I mean, that's the nature of athletics. But we're fortunate to have, each of the 3 universities has a great team. And we got some great, and Iowa State's got a great women's
I was
program.
gonna say, I better
too.
give the women some credit, because they beat Baylor. So,
Yeah.
I mean, whoa,
Yeah.
that was quite a game.
Number 3
By
team.
5 or 6,
Yeah.
yeah. So
So-
we got some good teams going on.
Yes.
Well, hopefully the next question won't be that tough. That's a dangerous thing to take side, We take one more?
One more question?
One just kind of relating to technology and healthcare, like telehealth.
Yep.
Yep.
I know it's one thing that Iowa is probably one of the few states that doesn't really provide any benefit for providing that. Is that something that they'll look at?
Yeah,
Especially with HMO?
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion about that, and,
'Cause it's tough for us to get doctors into this area. We're fortunate we have a relationship with the university and like a Tacoma Regional where we could put in place some of those services, but there's no benefit for them to come here.
well, they don't get reimbursement for it.
That's the problem. Yeah.
We have, of course, we have the Iowa Communications Network,
Right.
which connects the hospitals. So you're part of that. The big thing is, and I think we should address that, because I think more and more medical services are gonna be delivered that way, especially mental health.
I mean, through our
Well-
emergency room, we have it set up, but there's just not, with the University of Iowa, it's just incentive to do that. Right now, it's through a grant. Once it runs out, you know, they probably won't have a reason for wanting to do that unless we do see something.
Well, the big thing I hear is that there is not, they don't get the same reimbursement if it's done through telemedicine as you are otherwise.
Some of them don't
Especially if
get
they're out of
reimbursed
state,
at all.
right? Yeah. And
Yeah,
they're
that's
out
the
of state,
point.
real
Some of them don't get
problem.
reimbursed at all.
Yeah.
So we have this Iowa Health System, we have this Iowa Communications Network. I think we ought to be able to utilize it, and hopefully it actually could reduce healthcare costs if it's done right. So we'll look into that, hopefully that can get addressed.
It's gonna be beneficial, especially for us, like I said,
Right.
being as small as we are to recruit providers, physicians especially.
Well, in my
It's
previous
come up a
job as
lot.
the president of Des Moines University, we train physicians, and we have provided some incentives now for doctors to locate in rural areas. And we're providing some reimbursement of their, well, it's loan forgiveness, I guess,
Yeah.
if they locate in rural areas, underserved areas. And then we're also encouraging more residencies in Iowa. Because here's what I found. If they go to medical school in Iowa, and then they do their rotations in residency in Iowa, they're more likely to stay. But if you break that chain and they do their residency out of state, they're likely to get offered jobs there, and you don't get them back. So that's why we want to do more residencies in the state of Iowa. And also, you also want to admit people to medical school that grew up in rural Iowa. Because if they grew up somewhere in a big city, they're probably not going to come to a rural community. But if they grew up in rural Iowa and they have family and attachment there, they're much more likely to want to practice there after they complete their medical school and their rotations and their residency. Well, thank you very
Great
much. This is a
turnout.
great group.
It really
and
is.
A lot of
Thank
good
you.
questions, and, you know, I guess I would just say, it's exciting to see the companies that we have around the table here, and also the community leaders, and I think it's important to work together, and if you ever have a project or a prospect that you think a call from the governor's office would help, don't be bashful. And we know Bob pretty well. He bought my steer a year ago at the governor's steer show, so thank you for that too.
But thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody that came. It's great turnout.